Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time, not to a battlefield or a grand coronation, at least not yet, but to the quiet, lamplit rooms of a young prince's mind. Imagine the soft glow on dark wood, the rustle of maps far too large for the small country they represent. You are there, a young man with a future already charted, yet you're restlessly drawing new lines on the world. Lines leading to places most people in your comfortable European city can barely imagine. It's a journey into ambition, the kind that builds nations and, well, sometimes, as you'll see, the kind that can lead to unimaginable darkness. You probably won't survive this particular historical rabbit hole with your cheerful illusions about benevolent monarchs entirely intact, but hey, that's why we're here, right? To explore the shadows with a gentle curiosity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really helps the channel find other curious minds like yours. And while you're at it, maybe post your location and local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from as the world spins. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is, well, the exact year doesn't quite matter yet. It's that formative period, those late teenage years, perhaps early 20s, in the mid-19th century. You are Prince Leopold, Louis Philippe, Marie Victor, Duke of Brabant, heir to the Belgian throne. A string of grand names for a young man in a kingdom that feels, to you, rather like a well-appointed drawing room, comfortable, respectable, but undeniably small. The scent of beeswax polish and old books hangs in the air of the royal palace of Brussels, a scent you associate with duty, with the weighty expectations of your father, King Leopold III. He, the wise old monarch, carved Belgium out of revolution and diplomacy, a tiny buffer state nestled between the great powers of Europe. He's a figure of immense prestige, a German prince who became a British widower, then a Belgian king, a man who understands the delicate dance of European politics. He preaches caution, neutrality, the steady cultivation of industry and trade within your borders. Wise counsel, no doubt. But your gaze, even now, wanders beyond the neat hedgerows of Belgian estates, beyond the busy docks of Antwerp, towards the vast, tantalizingly blank spaces on the world maps. You feel a restlessness in your blood, a yearning that the carefully manicured gardens of Laeken can't satisfy. It's an ambition that gnaws at you, a conviction that Belgium, your Belgium, deserves more than just being a cog in the European machine. You need a grander stage. Scholars still debate the precise wellspring of this fervent colonial desire in you. Was it the prevailing imperialist fervor of the era, a deep-seated psychological need to prove yourself against the backdrop of your father's towering achievements, or a calculated understanding that true power and wealth lay beyond Europe's shores? Perhaps it's a cocktail of all three, swirling in your young mind as you trace the coastlines of Africa, Asia, the Americas, with a long, contemplative finger. Your upbringing has been thorough. Languages, history, economics, military strategy. You've toured Egypt, seen the Suez Canal in progress, a monumental feat of engineering that reshapes the globe. You've visited the Holy Land, absorbing the weight of ancient empires. These journeys aren't just grand tours for a privileged young royal. They are reconnaissance missions. You observe, you calculate, you compare. You see what countries like Great Britain and France possess: sprawling overseas territories, sources of immense wealth, manpower, and global prestige. And you think, why not Belgium? Why not me? It's a question that burns with a quiet intensity. You're not exactly the life of the party. Are you reserved? A little awkward, perhaps, with a formal bearing that keeps even your own family at a slight distance. Your marriage to Marie Henriette of Austria, a Habsburg archduchess, was more a matter of statecraft than a passionate romance. Finding a suitable Catholic princess was a bit like a diplomatic chess game. And let's just say, sparkling chemistry wasn't top of the criteria list. She loves horses. You love, well, the idea of vast, untapped lands. It's not exactly a match made in heaven, more like a match made in Brussels for political expediency. This was an era, remember, when much of the world was viewed by European powers as ripe for the taking, a giant cake to be sliced and distributed. The mainstream historical fact is that Leopold II would indeed become the second king of the Belgians in 1865, inheriting his father's throne, and, with it, the constitutional limitations he found so frustrating. But your dreams are already far exceeding those constitutional boundaries. You write copious notes, you devour reports from explorers, you listen intently to tales of exotic resources. The Belgian government, however, is stubbornly resistant to your colonial aspirations. They see the risks, the expense, the potential to upset the delicate balance of power that ensures Belgium's own survival. We are a small, neutral country, they argue. Colonies are for the great powers. This caution, this pragmatism, feels like a suffocating blanket to your fiery ambition. You feel like an eagle cooped up in a canary cage. If canaries were known for their meticulous bookkeeping and sensible infrastructure projects, you attend endless state dinners, the clinking of silverware a dull counterpoint to the vibrant images of jungles and rivers in your mind. You listen to speeches about Belgian industry, about the marvels of the railway network, and you nod politely, all the while strategizing. How can a king, even a future king of a small constitutional monarchy, acquire an empire if his own government won't back the venture? The question circles, a hawk in the internal landscape of your thoughts. The whispers of distant lands, of unclaimed territories teeming with unimaginable wealth, are a siren song that the worthy, if somewhat unexciting, pronouncements of Belgian ministers cannot drown out. The air in your private study is thick with these unspoken desires, the lamplight catching the sheen of your dark hair as you bend once more over those maps, the silent witnesses to a royal dream that is already beginning to cast a very long and very complex shadow. The scent of distant, fertile earth almost seems to emanate from the colored inks, a perfume of possibility. And you, Leopold, are a patient man. You know that if the front door is closed, there are always other ways in. The crown is now yours. December 1865. Your father, Leopold I, is gone, and you are king of the Belgians. The weight of it settles on your brow, not just the physical weight of the coronation circlet, but the intangible burden of expectation, of embodying a nation. The cheers in the streets of Brussels are loud, hopeful. You stand on balconies, wave to the crowds. A tall, somewhat imposing figure, your beard already beginning to take on that iconic, formidable shape. But as you perform these royal duties, your mind often drifts. The kingdom you inherit is prosperous, industrious, and resolutely, maddeningly, small-minded in its foreign policy, or so it seems to you. Belgium's independence and neutrality, a cornerstone of its existence guaranteed by the major European powers under the Treaty of London in 1839, is the very bedrock of its foreign policy. For your ministers, this neutrality is a sacred shield. For you, it often feels like a beautifully crafted cage. The rhythm of your days changes. State papers pile high on your desk. Not just the intriguing geographical surveys you once devoured, but endless reports on turnip yields, trade tariffs, and budgetary squabbles between political factions. Oh, the glamour of constitutional monarchy. You have the title, the palaces, the royal guard, but significant power, especially the power to unilaterally decide foreign adventures, rests with the parliament. You can propose, you can persuade, you can charm, and you certainly try, but you cannot command an empire into existence with a flick of the royal wrist. It's like wanting to drive a thundering steam locomotive and being told you first need to form a committee to debate the price of coal. Your marriage to Queen Marie Henriette continues its polite, somewhat frosty trajectory. She is vibrant, a skilled horsewoman, passionate about music and her dogs. You are passionate about acquiring several million square miles of territory. There's a certain disconnect at the breakfast table. Children arrive. First Louise, then your longed-for son, Leopold, Duke of Brabant, and then Stephanie. The birth of your son brings a brief flicker of warmth, of dynastic continuity. But tragedy strikes when young Leopold dies from pneumonia after falling into a pond. The loss is immense, a personal grief that hardens something within you, perhaps further fueling your desire for a legacy that transcends the fragile lives of individuals. Another daughter, Clementine, will follow. But the absence of a surviving male heir adds another layer of quiet pressure to your reign. You make speeches, you tour the country, you speak eloquently about the need for Belgium to extend its territory. You argue that colonies would provide new markets for Belgian goods, new sources of raw materials, and a grand national project to elevate Belgium's status. You paint pictures of Belgian tricolors fluttering over distant, sun-drenched lands. The response is often lukewarm applause, followed by lengthy parliamentary debates about the prohibitive costs and the dangers of international entanglements. They just don't see it. Your parliamentarians, your ministers, they're too busy worrying about the price of herring or the latest squabble over language laws to grasp the glorious destiny you envision. Trying to sell them on the idea of a tropical empire is like trying to convince a particularly cautious cat that a long swim is a fantastic idea for a Tuesday afternoon. Historical sources offer conflicting views on whether your early colonial setbacks, your failed attempts to purchase islands in the Pacific, or secure concessions in places like Formosa or the Philippines, were due more to your own occasional diplomatic missteps or the Belgian government's deeply entrenched anti-colonial stance. What is clear is your persistence. Rejection doesn't deter you. It merely prompts a change in tactics. If Belgium, the state, won't acquire a colony, then perhaps Leopold, the man, will have to find another way. You are, after all, not just a king but also a very wealthy individual, with a significant personal fortune. This realization begins to germinate, a seed of a new, audacious plan. The nights are long. While Brussels sleeps, or at least its more sensible inhabitants do. You are often still awake in your study. The lamplight still catches the glint in your eye as you pore over those maps you've treasured since youth, now augmented with fresh intelligence, with shipping routes, with notes on climate and resources. The world is a chessboard, and you are playing a patient, long game. The official duties, opening hospitals, reviewing troops, enduring endless banquets where the conversation is as starchy as the linen, are performed with meticulous correctness. But your true focus lies elsewhere, in the quiet hours when you can shed the persona of the constitutional monarch and become again the arch-strategist of your own imperial dreams. This dichotomy, this careful balancing act between public servant and private visionary, or perhaps private schemer, defines these early years of your reign. You are learning the art of patience, the craft of subtle influence, the necessity of finding proxies and alternative routes when the main road is barred. The grand dream of a Belgian empire might be stalled, but your personal ambition, that restless yearning you've nurtured since boyhood, is very much alive, burning like a hidden ember, waiting for the right breeze to flare into a conflagration. And the winds of change, you sense, are beginning to shift across the vast, largely uncharted heart of Africa. The frustration of those early years, hemmed in by cautious ministers and the rigid framework of Belgian neutrality, doesn't extinguish your ambition. It refines it, makes it more cunning. You realize that direct appeals for colonial conquest are falling on deaf ears. So, you pivot. If you cannot openly claim an empire for Belgium, perhaps you can acquire one under a different guise, a nobler banner. The night air in your study still buzzes with those grand, audacious thoughts, but now they are cloaked in the language of science, of progress, of humanitarianism. It's a masterful stroke of public relations, really, before the term even exists. You decide to host a conference, not a conference about colonial claims or resource exploitation. Oh no, nothing so crass. This will be the Brussels Geographical Conference of 1876. You invite the cream of European society-renowned explorers still brushing the dust of uncharted territories from their boots, learned geographers whose maps are reshaping the world's perceived empty spaces, wealthy philanthropists eager to attach their names to a noble cause, and even high-ranking dignitaries. The stated aim, which you articulate with impressive sincerity, is to coordinate efforts to explore Central Africa, to establish scientific outposts, and, this is your masterstroke, to abolish the Arab slave trade preying on the indigenous populations. It's a cause guaranteed to resonate in the hearts of 19th century Europeans, who, despite their own rather checkered global activities, possess a genuine abhorrence for that particular brand of slavery. It's a bit like a modern billionaire announcing a plan to save the rainforest, while quietly buying up all the logging companies. The conference itself is a grand affair. Crystal chandeliers glitter, illuminating earnest faces. Lofty speeches are made about the dark continent, awaiting the light of European civilization, about the moral imperative to intervene, to uplift, to protect. You preside over it all, the very picture of enlightened royalty, your tall figure exuding gravitas and benevolent concern. You speak of opening up Africa to legitimate trade, of bringing peace and scientific knowledge. It's quite the performance. If they gave out awards for convincingly portraying a disinterested humanitarian, you'd have a mantelpiece groaning with them. And from this carefully orchestrated gathering, the International African Association, AIA, is born. With you, naturally. elected as its first president. National committees are to be formed across Europe, ostensibly to fund and guide this great international philanthropic endeavor. It all sounds wonderfully altruistic, doesn't it? The perfect noble cause for a progressive age? The mainstream historical fact is that the Brussels Geographical Conference of 1876, convened by Leopold II, did indeed lead to the creation of the International African Association (AIA), presented as an international philanthropic body. Yet, from the very beginning, your private intentions for the AIA are quite different from its public face. While many participants are genuinely driven by anti-slavery zeal or scientific curiosity, you see the AIA primarily as a vehicle, a Trojan horse to advance your personal territorial ambitions in the Congo River Basin, a vast, mysterious region that has captured your imagination. The extent to which early members of the International African Association, particularly those from other countries, were truly aware of your ultimate territorial and commercial ambitions, rather than the stated humanitarian goals, remains a subject of considerable academic discussion. Some were undoubtedly swept up in the high-minded rhetoric. Others, perhaps more cynical or more aligned with their own national interests, may have had their suspicions but chose to play along. The beauty of the AIA, from your perspective, is its international character. It isn't Belgium seeking a colony. It's a supposedly disinterested collective of nations working for the good of Africa. This provides a convenient smokescreen, deflecting potential jealousies from the major colonial powers like Britain and France. They might object to little Belgium grabbing a huge slice of Africa, but an international effort to end slavery and promote science much harder to criticize, especially when you're footing a significant portion of the bill yourself, using your considerable personal wealth to fund expeditions and establish stations. These stations, you explain, will be beacons of civilization, oases of peace and learning in your mind. However, they are also conveniently placed markers of influence, future trading posts, and administrative centers for the territory you intend to control. The nights continue to be your domain for this clandestine work. While the city sleeps, you are drafting statutes for the AIA, writing letters to potential donors and explorers, carefully choosing words that inspire confidence and obscure your deeper motives. The lamplight falls on phrases like scientific discovery, humane progress, and suppression of the slave trade, while your thoughts are filled with calculations of river navigability, resource potential, and strategic control points. It's a delicate balancing act. This linguistic sleight of hand. You are weaving a narrative, a compelling story that will allow you to achieve what direct political means could not. And the key to unlocking the vast wealth you believe lies in the heart of Africa is finding the right man, an explorer with the skill, the ambition, and perhaps the moral flexibility to make your vision a reality on the ground. The search for that man is already underway, and the name of Henry Morton Stanley, the famous journalist explorer, is rising to the top of your list. The explorer's cloak fits you surprisingly well, concealing the iron will of a king determined to carve out his own private empire, one philanthropic speech at a time. The International African Association, your philanthropic masterpiece, provides the perfect stage, but you still need a lead actor, someone to venture into the equatorial depths and lay the practical groundwork for your grand design. Your gaze, sweeping across the roster of known explorers, settles on one name, Henry Morton Stanley. He's a man of considerable, if somewhat brash, renown, already famous for his arduous search for David Livingstone. Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Well, Stanley is not a man of delicate sensibilities. He's a driven, tenacious, and some might say ruthless individual, forged in hardship and utterly committed to whatever task he undertakes. Not necessarily the fellow you'd invite for a quiet cup of tea and a chat about poetry, but if you need a path carved through an unforgiving jungle, both literal and metaphorical, Stanley is your man. You arrange to meet him, discreetly. Of course, the details of these initial encounters are shrouded in the mists of private diplomacy, but the outcome is clear. You, with your regal charm and carefully worded propositions, and Stanley, with his hunger for grand undertakings and, no doubt, generous funding, strike a deal. He isn't officially working for King Leopold II, nor for Belgium. Oh no. He's to be an agent of the newly formed Committee for Studies of the Upper Congo, Comité d'études du Haut-Congo, or CEHC, yet another organization you conjure into existence, sounding impeccably scientific and commercial. This committee soon morphs into the International Association of the Congo IAC, also under your firm, albeit discreet, control. The mission, as presented to the public, and perhaps even to Stanley in its initial framing, is to establish a series of trading stations, to open routes for commerce, and to bring the benefits of civilization to the inhabitants of the Congo River Basin. There's always a lot of talk about civilization when someone's about to plant a flag. So, in 1879, Stanley sets off. You remain in Brussels, in your lamplit study, far from the heat, the insects, and the immense labor involved, while Stanley and his caravan of porters and soldiers sweat and toil, battling rapids, disease, and dense rainforest. You await his dispatches. These reports, filled with sketches of river courses, details of resources, and accounts of encounters with local chiefs, are your lifeline to the enterprise. Henry Morton Stanley, already famous for finding David Livingstone, was indeed hired by Leopold II, under the guise of these various associations, to explore and establish a presence for your interests along the Congo River. His task is monumental: to navigate the unnavigable, to build roads around impassable cataracts, and, crucially, to secure treaties with hundreds of local African rulers. These treaties are a fascinating and deeply troubling aspect of the venture. Stanley, often with a small armed escort and a display of European goods, brightly colored cloth, trinkets, perhaps a bit of gin, would meet with a village headman or chief. A document, penned in a European language entirely alien to the local leader, would be produced. It would be full of complex legal phrases, speaking of ceding sovereignty, granting trade monopolies, and committing to provide labor, all in exchange for a few pieces of cloth or some other trifles. Debate continues among historians regarding the true nature of these hundreds of treaties Stanley signed with local chiefs, whether they were truly understood as legitimate, binding agreements by both parties, or if they were essentially instruments of deception, leveraging the chief's lack of understanding of European legal concepts and the implicit threat of force. It's a bit like agreeing to give someone your house in exchange for a shiny button, especially when the contract is read out in Klingon. The chiefs often believed they were signing agreements for friendship, for trade, or for protection, not relinquishing their land and autonomy forever. Stanley, for his part, collected these documents meticulously, bundles of paper that, in your eyes, formed the legal bedrock of your future state. Back in Brussels, You pore over Stanley's progress reports late into the night. The flickering gaslight illuminates the maps he sends, lines inching further and further up the snaking course of the Congo River. Each new station established, Vivi, Stanley Pool, and others, is a victory, a tangible step towards your goal. You are investing a considerable amount of your personal fortune into this, a high-stakes gamble. While you are managing the stock portfolio of your burgeoning African dream, Stanley is out there dodging actual crocodiles and negotiating with peoples who have never seen a white man before. The sheer audacity of it all is breathtaking. He's not just exploring, he's effectively laying claim to an enormous swathe of Central Africa, an area nearly 80 times the size of Belgium, all under the banner of scientific research and philanthropic endeavor. The hardships faced by Stanley's expeditions are immense, though the full extent of the brutality that would later characterize your rule is yet to unfold. For now, the focus is on establishing a foothold, on pushing through the wilderness. His men, both European and African, suffer greatly from disease, from the grueling labor of road construction, the famous porterage route around the cataracts, and from skirmishes with tribes who understandably resist this sudden intrusion. Stanley himself drives them relentlessly. He is building your path, station by station, treaty by treaty, pushing your influence deeper into the heart of a continent you have never seen but are determined to possess. The ink on those treaties, signed with an X by men who could not read them, is drying, and with each one, your dream of a private empire comes closer to reality, while the soft rain of a Brussels evening perhaps whispers outside your window, a gentle contrast to the humid, vibrant, and increasingly troubled air of the distant Congo. Stanley's work on the ground, those hundreds of treaties and the string of newly established stations along the mighty Congo River, has given you something tangible, a claim, albeit a contested one. But pieces of paper signed by bewildered chiefs in the depths of Africa are one thing. International recognition is quite another. The great European powers are now fully engaged in what history will call the scramble for Africa. It's like a sudden, continent-wide gold rush, with everyone from Great Britain and France to newly unified Germany and Portugal staking out vast territories. You know that without the formal blessing of these major players, your fledgling enterprise in the Congo could be swallowed whole by a larger, hungrier empire. The air in your Brussels study, usually just filled with the scent of old paper and your own quiet ambition, now seems to crackle with geopolitical tension. The solution, or at least the arena for it, comes in the form of the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885. Hosted by Otto von Bismarck, the formidable Chancellor of Germany, its ostensible purpose is to lay down some ground rules for this chaotic scramble, to prevent the European powers from actually going to war with each other over African land. They're all about avoiding squabbles amongst themselves. You see, the feelings of the people already living on the continent are, shall we say, a secondary concern. You are not officially a major player at this conference. Little Belgium doesn't command that kind of clout, and your International Association of the Congo IAC is, well, not even a country. It's more like a very ambitious NGO with its own steamboats and a surprising number of flags. Yet, this is where your years of patient, behind-the-scenes maneuvering, your carefully cultivated image as a philanthropist, and your sheer audacity truly pay off. You deploy a veritable army of lobbyists, envoys, and persuasive agents to Berlin and to the capitals of Europe and, crucially, to the United States. You work tirelessly, charming diplomats, providing reassurances, and playing the great powers off against each other. Your argument is clever. The IAC is not seeking to create a colony in the traditional sense. Oh no, it aims to establish a vast free trade zone in the Congo Basin, open to all nations, a place where commerce will flourish. And here comes that trusty old argument again. The slave trade will be eradicated. You promise neutrality for the region, a sort of commercial and humanitarian utopia that will benefit everyone. It's a beautiful vision, and you sell it with the earnest conviction of a seasoned preacher. Remarkably, the United States is the first major nation to recognize the flag of the IAC as that of a friendly government. This American endorsement is a huge coup, lending an air of legitimacy that others find harder to ignore. It's a bit like getting a 5-star review from the most influential blogger before your restaurant has even officially opened. At the Berlin Conference itself, while the assembled powers didn't explicitly give the Congo to you, the Berlin Act of 1885 effectively legitimized your claims by recognizing the International Association of the Congo as a sovereign power capable of administering the territories it controlled. It's a diplomatic masterstroke of almost unbelievable proportions. You, a king acting in your private capacity, have convinced the world's most powerful nations to recognize your personal association as the legitimate government of an area 77 times the size of Belgium. Scholarly interpretations differ on the primary motivations of the great powers, particularly Bismarck. In essentially green-lighting your audacious bid, was it a genuine, if naive, belief in your humanitarian pronouncements and the benefits of a free trade zone? Was it a strategic move to prevent the vast Congo Basin from falling into the hands of a major rival like France or Britain, thus upsetting the delicate European balance of power? Or was it a more cynical calculation that allowing a supposedly weaker, internationalized entity under your control was a convenient way to manage a potentially troublesome region without any one great power having to shoulder the full burden or risk direct conflict? Perhaps a little of all three. So, in August 1885, just a few months after the Berlin Conference concludes, you proclaim the existence of the Congo Free State, with yourself, Leopold II, as its king sovereign, not a Belgian colony. Mind you, this is your personal property, your private kingdom, an arrangement almost unprecedented in modern history. It's like going to a very serious international summit about shared global resources and walking out having personally acquired, say, the entire Amazon rainforest. The sheer nerve is astonishing. You assure the world that this new state will be a beacon of progress, that its administration will be humane, and that trade will be free for all. The reality, as the humid nights in the Congo will soon testify, is destined to be starkly, tragically different. For now, though, you can permit yourself a moment of quiet, profound satisfaction. In your lamplit study, surrounded by the maps that are no longer just dreams, but represent actual territory under your personal rule, you have achieved the impossible. You, the king of a small, neutral nation, have outmaneuvered the giants of Europe and secured an empire. The gentle rain that might be falling on the cobblestones of Brussels sounds like applause. The official documents, signed and sealed, lie before you, granting you absolute power over millions of people and a vast, uncharted land. You are the architect and owner of the Congo Free State. The stage is set, your stage, and the world, for a little while longer, believes in the benevolent mask you wear so convincingly. The lights of Europe gleam. But a deep shadow is beginning to fall across the heart of Africa, a shadow cast by a royal dream that is rapidly becoming a very different kind of reality. Your private kingdom, the Congo Free State, is now a reality on paper, recognized by the great powers of the world. But an empire, even a personal one, needs revenue. Philanthropic rhetoric and neatly drawn borders on maps don't pay for steamships, for soldiers, for the grand architectural projects you're already dreaming of back in Belgium. And so, your focus shifts to the vast untapped wealth you believe lies hidden within those dense forests and sprawling savannas. The first glittering prize that catches your royal eye is ivory. White gold, they call it, and the Congo is teeming with elephants. The elephants, had they been consulted, might have lodged a formal complaint about this sudden, intense surge in their tusks' popularity. In these early years of your rule, the ivory trade becomes a central pillar of the Free State's economy, which is to say, your personal economy. It's not a simple matter of just sending out hunters. The eastern reaches of your vast domain are already deeply entwined in long-established Arab-Swahili trading networks, controlled by powerful figures like Hamid bin Mohammed al-Murjibi, better known as Tipu Tip. These traders have for decades dealt in ivory and also, significantly, in slaves, often raiding communities and marching captives to the coast. You, the great humanitarian, the man who convened conferences to abolish slavery, now find yourself in a complex and morally murky dance with these very slave traders. Initially, you even strike deals with some, appointing figures like Tipu Tip as governors in certain regions, using their existing networks to funnel ivory towards your state agents. It's a pragmatic, if deeply cynical, alliance of convenience. Soon, however, this fragile cooperation breaks down. You can't have commercial rivals, especially ones who also tarnish your carefully constructed anti-slavery image too overtly. Thus begin the campaigns that history calls the Belgo-Arab War or the Congo-Arab War in the early 1890s. Publicly, these are framed as righteous crusades to finally crush the slave trade in Central Africa, fulfilling your Berlin Conference pledges. And indeed, your forces, the nascent force publique, your private army in the Congo, do fight against these Swahili strongmen. Ivory was indeed a primary source of revenue in the early years of the Congo Free State, and to secure it, Leopold II's administration waged military campaigns against established Arab Swahili traders in the eastern regions. It is a point of ongoing scholarly inquiry, however, whether this war was primarily motivated by your stated humanitarian anti-slavery aims, or more by a cold, calculated desire to eliminate powerful commercial competitors, gain undisputed control over the lucrative ivory and increasingly rubber resources, and consolidate the state's authority. Perhaps, as is so often the case with your endeavors, it was a convenient fusion of both. With your rivals being systematically dismantled, you move to solidify your absolute control over the Congo's wealth. A series of decrees are issued from your distant perch in Brussels. The most sweeping of these declares all vacant land, terras vacantes, to be the property of the state, which is to say, your property. And what constitutes vacant land? Essentially, any land not actively cultivated or inhabited by indigenous communities. Given the traditional land use patterns of many Congolese peoples, communal ownership, shifting cultivation, vast hunting and foraging territories, this decree effectively expropriates almost the entire country, along with all its natural resources. It's a bit like declaring all the air in a room vacant except for the tiny pockets people are currently breathing. Suddenly, every elephant tusk, every rubber vine, every valuable tree belongs to you. The system for collecting ivory becomes more organized, more rapacious. State officials and agents of concessionary companies to whom you grant enormous tracts of land are tasked with acquiring ivory quotas. They, in turn, compel local African communities to hunt elephants and deliver the tusks. Often, these demands are backed by the armed might of the force publique. Villages are assigned quotas, and failure to meet them can result in punishment. The concept of free trade, so eloquently championed by your representatives in Berlin, becomes a rather bitter joke. It's free in the sense that you are free to take what you want, and international traders find themselves increasingly squeezed out by your monopolies. Back in Brussels, the ledgers in your private office begin to fill with encouraging figures. Shipments of ivory arrive in Antwerp, sold for handsome profits on the European markets. The soft glow of the lamp in your study illuminates columns of numbers, a testament to your growing wealth. You meticulously track the expenses and the income, the shrewd businessman king counting the returns from his vast African investment. Dispatches arrive from your agents in Boma, the capital of the Free State, detailing the pacification of new regions, the establishment of new trading posts, the increasing yields of ivory, the human cost of this enterprise, the coercion, the disruption of societies, the burgeoning resentment. These are distant murmurs, easily lost in the rustle of banknotes and the grand designs taking shape in your mind for new museums and avenues in your European capital. You are building a kingdom of profit, ivory tusk by ivory tusk, entangling the land and its people in an economic web spun from afar, a web that is already beginning to feel less like a support and more like a tightening snare. The lure of white gold has proven strong, but an even more lucrative and far more terrible commodity is about to emerge from the depths of your forest kingdom. The profits from ivory are substantial, lining your coffers and funding your grand projects in Belgium. But as the 19th century speeds towards its close, a new commodity explodes onto the world market, promising even greater riches. It's sticky, elastic, and suddenly indispensable to the modern world: rubber. The invention and popularization of the pneumatic tire by a certain Mr. Dunlop and others creates an insatiable global hunger for it. For bicycles, for the newfangled automobiles that are beginning to appear on city streets. And as fortune would have it, your vast Congo Free State is choked with wild rubber vines, Landolphia awariensis, their sap now more precious than gold. You, ever the astute businessman, quickly recognize this golden opportunity, or perhaps, more accurately, this red gold opportunity, for the price of this rubber will be paid in human suffering on an almost unimaginable scale. The shift from a primary focus on ivory to rubber collection fundamentally changes the nature and intensity of exploitation in your private kingdom. Ivory, while often brutally acquired, is a finite resource per animal. Rubber sap, however, can be tapped repeatedly, and the demand seems endless. Your administration, a complex network of state officials and agents from various concessionary companies to whom you've leased vast territories, responds to this new boom with ruthless efficiency. The infamous quota system is now rigorously applied to rubber collection. Villages deep in the rainforest are assigned impossibly high targets for raw rubber to be delivered to collection points. To meet these quotas, adult men are forced to abandon their own farming, their hunting, their families, and trek for days, sometimes weeks, into dangerous, unfamiliar forests to find and tap the wild rubber vines. The process of collecting the sap is arduous and often painful. Men slash the thick vines with knives and then smear the sticky, slow-oozing latex onto their own bodies, letting it dry before painfully scraping it off. The alternative is to stay in the forest for days, waiting for it to coagulate in rudimentary containers. Neither option is pleasant, and the quantities demanded are enormous. And what happens if a village fails to meet its quota? This is where the system turns truly monstrous. The demand for rubber, particularly after the invention of the pneumatic tire, led to widespread forced labor and horrific atrocities in Leopold's Congo Free State, including murder and mutilation, as agents enforced impossible rubber quotas. To ensure compliance, a reign of terror is unleashed. The most notorious tactic is hostage-taking. Women and children are rounded up from villages, herded into stockades, and held captive, often in appalling conditions, until their husbands, fathers, and sons deliver the required amount of rubber. Starvation, disease, and despair become rampant in these hostage pens. Your enforcers in this system are the force publique, your private army, now largely composed of Africans press-ganged into service from one region to terrorize another. Led by European officers, these soldiers, often brutalize themselves, become the instruments of coercion. They accompany the agents, flogging, imprisoning, and killing those who resist or fail to meet the quotas. One has to, with a shudder, acknowledge the perverse logistical dedication to ensuring every last drop of sap was accounted for. If one were, say, an auditor, entirely devoid of a conscience. And then, there are the hands. Reports begin to filter out. Tales so horrifying, they are initially dismissed by many in Europe as exaggerations, to prove that bullets, which are expensive, haven't been wasted on hunting animals. Soldiers of the force publique are often required to bring back the severed right hand of any rebel they kill. If a village or individual resists, or if quotas are not met, summary executions can follow, and hands are taken as proof of the punishment delivered. Sometimes, hands are severed from the living. The image of baskets of smoked human hands, presented to white agents as proof of work done, will become one of the most enduring and sickening symbols of your Congo. The precise death toll in the Congo Free State under your rule, resulting directly from violence, or indirectly from starvation, disease, and the utter destruction of traditional ways of life as people fled their villages or were worked to death, is still a matter of intense academic debate, though most estimates suggest millions perished. Villages become hollowed-out shells. Fields lie fallow as the men are perpetually in the forests. Famine becomes a constant companion to terror. The civilizing mission, the noble cause you proclaim to the world, has mutated into a murderous machine for extracting rubber. Ah, the wonders of industrial progress, bringing the gift of the bicycle and the automobile to the comfortable Western world. Its smooth ride unknowingly paved with the blood and tears of countless terrified, exhausted Congolese villagers. And you, back in your elegant palaces in Brussels and Ostend, what do you know of this? The reports that reach your desk are likely sanitized, focusing on the soaring rubber outputs, the ballooning profits that make you one of the richest men in Europe. The quarterly summaries probably had a very concise section on population management techniques and a very, very long detailed one on rubber yields and profit margins. Yeah, you issue decrees from afar, demanding ever-increasing efficiency, more rubber, more revenue. Any concerns about methods are likely framed in terms of maintaining productivity, not alleviating suffering. The Congo Free State is your personal enterprise, and it is, by the grim metrics of profit, a staggering success. The distant screams from the rainforest are drowned out by the satisfying clink of gold coins filling your treasury, funding your royal ambitions, and staining your legacy indelibly. The soft lamplight in your study illuminates a balance sheet written in red gold, and the night itself seems to hold its breath. The river of red gold, the rubber from your Congo, flows ever faster into your coffers, enriching you beyond measure, transforming the urban landscape of Brussels with grand avenues and imposing museums built with its proceeds. From your distant vantage point, cushioned by wealth and royal prestige, the system appears to be a marvel of efficiency. But the silence that surrounds the brutal mechanics of this efficiency cannot hold forever. Like the slow, persistent creep of jungle vines, whispers of cruelty begin to snake their way out of the depths of your private kingdom, challenging the carefully crafted narrative of your benevolent and civilizing rule. The first trickles of truth begin to seep under the gilded doors of your European palaces. These initial voices of dissent are few and often isolated. They belong to individuals who find themselves confronted by a reality so horrific it shatters their assumptions and compels them to speak out, despite the considerable risks. Among the earliest and most courageous are Christian missionaries. Men like the African-American journalist and historian George Washington Williams, who, after visiting the Congo in 1890, writes an open letter to you, a damning indictment of the brutal exploitation and deceit he has witnessed. He speaks of crimes against humanity, of villages burned, of people terrorized. Then there is William Henry Shepherd, another African-American, a Presbyterian missionary who documents the atrocities committed by your agents and soldiers, particularly the shocking practice of severing hands. Early reports of widespread atrocities in the Congo Free State indeed came from Protestant missionaries like the American George Washington Williams and the African-American William Henry Shepherd, who documented the abuses they witnessed firsthand. These men, and women too, driven by their faith and a profound sense of injustice, begin to send letters, diaries, and articles back to their home countries, painting a picture of your Congo that is starkly at odds with your philanthropic pronouncements. Conscientious missionaries with notebooks and a moral compass, so terribly inconvenient to the smooth operation of a profit-driven enterprise built on terror. It's not just missionaries, disillusioned former state employees, commercial agents who develop a conscience, or travelers simply passing through certain regions also begin to share disturbing accounts. They speak of forced labor, of hostages held in squalor, of the ubiquitous presence of the force publique and their brutal methods. These are not the grand, sweeping condemnations that will come later, but rather fragmented, eyewitness testimonies, often shared in private correspondence or obscure journals. Each story is a pinprick of light in the overwhelming darkness you have so carefully maintained. Of course, you and your well-oiled propaganda machine do not take these accusations lying down. These meddling missionaries and disgruntled former employees are easily dismissed. You argue, They are exaggerating, you claim, or they are agents of jealous rival colonial powers, particularly Protestant Britain, envious of your Catholic Majesty's success. You have powerful friends, and your immense wealth buys considerable influence. Newspapers are persuaded to publish rebuttals, to praise your civilizing work. Official denials are issued, smooth and plausible. From Brussels, the official response to emerging tales of severed hands was probably something along the lines of regrettable, isolated incidents, or perhaps unfortunate workplace accidents within the burgeoning rubber collection industry. All claims being thoroughly investigated, of course, and found to be vastly overstated by those with an agenda. The challenge for these early whistleblowers is immense. There's no internet, no 24-hour news cycle to amplify their voices. Getting anyone in positions of power to listen, let alone act, against a reigning monarch, a respected European king, is an arduous, almost impossible task. If you didn't have a viral video of the atrocities back then, or at least a widely circulated pamphlet with some rather gruesome photographs, which would come later, with figures like Alice Seeley Harris, convincing the comfortable drawing rooms of Europe that such horrors were truly happening, was an uphill battle. There is ongoing scholarly discussion about the degree to which various European governments were tacitly aware of the abuses in the Congo Free State long before the major public campaigns gained traction, and precisely why they were initially so reluctant to intervene, despite the mounting anecdotal evidence, geopolitics, trade interests, and the desire not to upset the colonial apple cart likely all played their part. Yet, the whispers persist. They are like the drip, drip, drip of water that eventually wears away stone. A letter here, a diary entry there, a smuggled photograph, a hushed conversation in a London or Boston drawing room. Each account adds to a growing, deeply disturbing mosaic. The night in your study in Brussels might now occasionally be disturbed by the arrival of a translated copy of a critical pamphlet, or a report from one of your aides about a particularly persistent missionary. You might skim these documents by the dimming lamplight, a frown creasing your brow, not perhaps from guilt, but from the annoyance of these troublesome flies buzzing around your grand enterprise. You instruct your ministers to redouble their efforts to counter these slanders, to invite friendly journalists for carefully guided tours of selected, sanitized parts of the Congo. But the truth, however deeply buried, has a persistent way of clawing its way to the surface. The first faint scratches are appearing on the gleaming facade of your Congo Free State, and though you cannot see it yet, the tide of public opinion, so long in your favor, is slowly, almost imperceptibly, beginning to turn. The whispers of cruelty, those persistent, troubling accounts from missionaries and disillusioned traders, are beginning to coalesce into a discernible murmur of international concern. Your carefully constructed facade of benevolence is showing more and more cracks, while you continue to project an image of enlightened rule, hosting grand exhibitions in Belgium that showcase the supposed civilizing work being done in the Congo, complete with imported and often tragically ill-fated Congolese villagers displayed in model native settings. The ugly truth refuses to stay entirely hidden. The drip, drip, drip of horrifying testimonies is starting to erode even the most determined apathy in European capitals. And one of the great powers, Great Britain, with its own complex colonial history, but also a strong humanitarian lobby and, perhaps, an eye on your increasingly profitable African venture, decides it's time for a closer, official look. Enter Roger Casement, He is the British consul stationed in Boma, the capital of your Congo Free State. An Irishman by birth. Casement is a man of principle, meticulous in his observations, and possessed of a quiet determination. He is not someone easily fooled by official pronouncements or stage-managed tours. In 1903, he is tasked by the British Foreign Office to travel into the interior of your domain and report on conditions, particularly concerning the treatment of the native population and the realities of the trade system you've established. This isn't some wild-eyed journalist looking for a sensational story. This is a respected consular official undertaking a formal investigation. There's nothing quite like a meticulously documented government report, penned by a sober civil servant, to throw a rather large spanner into the works of a smoothly running atrocity machine. Casement embarks on a grueling journey up the Congo River, venturing into the heart of the rubber-producing regions. What he witnesses, and what he painstakingly records in his notebooks, confirms the worst of the whispered horrors. And then some. He doesn't just listen to rumors, he interviews the victims themselves. He sees the depopulated villages, the signs of terror, the pervasive fear. He documents the stories of men forced into the forests for weeks on end, of women and children held hostage, of the brutal punishments meted out by the Force Publique and company agents for failing to meet the impossible rubber quotas. He sees the mutilated men, women, and children with their right hands hacked off. He meticulously collects testimonies, cross-references accounts, and gathers evidence with the dispassionate precision of a forensic investigator. The report he compiles, which will become known simply as the Casement Report, is not a collection of hearsay. It is a calm, factual, and utterly damning indictment of your entire system. When the Casement Report is officially published in 1904, though heavily redacted by the British government to remove some of the most gruesome details, lest they be deemed too inflammatory or unbelievable, it lands like a bombshell. The Casement Report, authored by the British consul Roger Casement and published in 1904, provided extensive, credible, and devastating evidence of widespread, systematic human rights abuses in the Congo Free State. Despite your immediate and furious attempts to discredit Casement, to paint him as a biased troublemaker, an agent of British imperial ambitions, the sheer weight of his evidence is hard to dismiss. The report, even in its censored form, with its understated diplomatic language that probably described scenes of utter devastation as a certain degree of societal disruption, sends a shockwave through public opinion in Britain, America, and across Europe. The whispers have now become an official, documented roar. Considerable debate exists among historians regarding the extent to which genuine humanitarian concerns versus strategic geopolitical considerations and commercial rivalries with your increasingly monopolistic Congo enterprise truly motivated the British government's decision to commission and then publish the Casement Report. Whatever the complex mix of motives in Whitehall, the effect is undeniable. The carefully built dam of denial and misinformation you've maintained for so long has been breached. Your reaction is one of regal outrage. How dare they, you, the benevolent sovereign, being accused of such barbarities in your own private domain? You'd think a monarch had a right to manage his personal property and its, human resources as he saw fit, without all these pesky consular officials poking around with their notepads, their inconvenient facts, and their highly developed moral compasses. You immediately commission your own independent commission of inquiry, hoping to either refute Casement's findings or at least muddy the waters and buy more time. But the tide is turning. The meticulously gathered truths in Casement's neat consular handwriting are now circulating, and the world is beginning to pay very close attention. The lamplight in your Brussels study must have burned very late into many nights as you and your advisors huddled, strategizing how to counter this unprecedented assault on your reputation and your profitable African kingdom. The comfortable darkness that had shielded your Congo enterprise for so long is being pierced by an unwelcome and increasingly intense beam of scrutiny. Roger Casement's meticulously detailed report, despite your best efforts to discredit it and its author, acts like a lit match tossed into a room filled with dry tinder. The whispers of cruelty have now been amplified into a coherent and damning indictment, backed by the authority of a British consular official. Suddenly, the carefully guarded secrets of your Congo Free State are illuminated for all the world to see. And the world, or at least a significant and increasingly vocal part of it, awakens in horror. The comfortable, lamplit evenings you so cherish in Brussels are about to become far less tranquil. The true firestorm is ignited by a man named Edmond Dean Morel. Morel is not a high-ranking diplomat or a famous explorer. He's a diligent shipping clerk working in Liverpool. His job gives him access to the trade manifests of ships plying the route between Belgium and your Congo Free State. With a sharp eye and an inquisitive mind, he notices a deeply disturbing anomaly. Vast quantities of rubber and ivory are arriving in Antwerp from the Congo. Yet the ships returning to Africa carry almost no commercial goods in exchange. Instead, they are laden with soldiers, firearms, and ammunition. Morel deduces, with chilling accuracy, that this isn't trade. It's slavery. This isn't commerce. It's systematic plunder enforced by violence. He realizes that the only way such vast quantities of resources could be extracted with so little going back in return is through forced labor on a massive scale. This realization transforms him from a quiet clerk into a crusading journalist and one of history's most effective human rights campaigners. In 1904, inspired and further armed by Casement's findings, Morel founds the Congo Reform Association CRA. The Congo Reform Association, spearheaded by E.D. Morel, indeed became a highly effective international mass protest movement, uniting prominent writers, politicians, humanitarians, and ordinary citizens to campaign against your atrocities in the Congo. This isn't just a small group of concerned individuals. It rapidly becomes a powerful, widespread popular movement, one of the first truly international human rights campaigns of the modern era. Morel is a whirlwind of energy, writing impassioned articles, publishing pamphlets like the famous Red Rubber, delivering fiery speeches, and organizing public meetings across Britain and then internationally. He's an absolute nuisance, from your perspective, a man who simply won't shut up about the inconvenient truths of your profitable enterprise. And he's not alone. The evidence is now too compelling, too horrifying to ignore. Prominent international figures, people whose voices carry immense weight, begin to join the chorus of condemnation. Mark Twain, the celebrated American author, dips his pen in vitriol and writes King Leopold's Soliloquy, a scathing satirical monologue in which you, Leopold, lament the public relations nightmare that has befallen you, all while inadvertently revealing your monstrous greed and cruelty. It's a literary hand grenade tossed directly at your royal person. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, also takes up the cause, writing The Crime of the Congo, laying out the case against your regime with clear, prosecutorial force. It's as if suddenly, every popular novelist with a conscience has decided your reign of terror is their next big subject. So inconvenient. Photographic evidence also begins to play a crucial role. Missionaries like Alice Seeley Harris, with her camera, capture indelible images of the victims of your regime, most famously, a Congolese man named Nsala, looking at the severed hand and foot of his young daughter, a punishment for failing to meet a rubber quota. These images, reproduced in newspapers and shown at lantern slide lectures organized by the CRA, bring the distant suffering of the Congo into sharp, undeniable focus for audiences across the Western world. The abstract reports of atrocities become real, human tragedies. The pressure mounts. Public meetings draw huge crowds. Petitions with hundreds of thousands of signatures land on the desks of politicians in London, Washington, and other capitals. Church leaders speak out from their pulpits. Suddenly, it seems everyone is an expert on Congolese resource extraction methods and the finer points of your administration. It's like the whole world has decided to send strongly worded letters and resolutions to your royal suggestion box, a suggestion box you, of course, never bothered to install because you didn't think you needed any suggestions on how to run your own private country. Academic perspectives vary on the primary catalyst for this widespread public mobilization. Was it the sheer moral force of the overwhelming evidence itself? The brilliant and tireless campaigning of figures like Morel and Casement? Or perhaps the opportune alignment of this rising humanitarian sentiment with the strategic or economic interests of rival nations that were beginning to find your Congo monopoly rather irksome? Whatever the precise combination of factors, the result is a tidal wave of public indignation directed squarely at you. Your attempts to counter this with your own propaganda, your lavishly funded denials, and your carefully orchestrated fact-finding missions begin to look increasingly hollow, even desperate. The nights in Brussels must feel longer now. The silence of your palace perhaps punctuated by the imagined shouts of distant protesters, the rustle of newspapers carrying ever more critical headlines. The world has awakened, and it is pointing an accusatory finger directly at you. Leopold, King Sovereign of the Congo Free State, the man who dreamed of an empire and created a nightmare, the global roar of condemnation, fueled by Morel's relentless campaigning. Casement's stark report, and the haunting images of mutilation, is now too loud for even you to ignore. Insulated as you are by royal privilege and immense wealth, your attempts at damage control are failing spectacularly. Even your own hand-picked Commission of Inquiry, which you established in 1904 hoping for a whitewash, backfires. While its report, published in 1905, is more cautiously worded than Casement's, it still confirms that serious abuses are widespread in your Congo Free State. It's a bit like hoping for a 5-star review for your very exclusive, very private venture, and instead getting a notice that it needs to be shut down by the health department, or at least undergo radical management changes. The report, in its own way, validates your critics and further inflames international opinion. The pressure from foreign governments, particularly Great Britain and the United States, becomes relentless. What were once polite diplomatic murmurs of concern now escalate to thinly veiled threats of intervention. The prospect of an international conference to decide the fate of the Congo, or even a naval blockade of the Congo River, looms large. Your fellow monarchs in Europe are likely starting to view you as a bit of an embarrassment, a rogue elephant in the carefully manicured garden of colonial empires, the club of colonial powers, while hardly saints themselves. prefers its exploitation to be a little less photographable. Within Belgium itself, the mood is shifting. For years, the Belgian public and parliament had largely accepted your narrative of a philanthropic enterprise, or at least turned a blind eye, happy to see the national prestige and your personal wealth grow. But the sheer weight of evidence, the international outcry, and the undeniable stain on Belgium's reputation are becoming too much to bear. Politicians who once praised your foresight now speak of the Congo question with furrowed brows. There's a growing realization that your private kingdom has become a massive international liability. The debate begins in earnest. Should Belgium annex the Congo? It's not a universally popular idea. Some Belgians are horrified at the thought of taking on the responsibility for such a vast, troubled territory and the cost associated with reforming its administration. Others, however, see it as a national duty, a way to salvage some honor, and, not incidentally, to ensure that the Congo's immense wealth continues to flow towards Belgium, albeit under a more respectable, state-controlled system. Belgium, after much soul-searching and vigorous parliamentary debate, seemed to be bravely steeling itself to take on the heavy burden of all that lovely rubber, copper, and ivory. You, of course, fight the idea of annexation tooth and nail, or at least fight for the best possible terms for yourself. This is your creation, your property, wrested from the dark continent by your genius and perseverance and Stanley's legwork, and the force publique's rather persuasive methods. The idea of simply handing it over to the Belgian government to be managed by committees and meddling politicians is anathema to you. The negotiations are protracted, bitter, and conducted largely behind closed doors, late into the night. You haggle over every detail, every franc. Even with your global reputation in tatters and the world effectively calling for your imperial resignation, you still negotiate with the tenacity of a street merchant determined to get the last centime for a slightly used, albeit blood-soaked, carriage. Except this carriage is nearly 80 times the size of Belgium. You demand generous financial compensation for your sacrifices in developing the Congo. You fight to retain control over vast swaths of land through special concessions. But the pressure is too great. The international community is losing patience, and the Belgian government, pushed by a coalition of reformers and pragmatists, finally acts. In 1908, after years of escalating international condemnation and undeniable evidence of horrific abuses, you, King Leopold II, are compelled to cede the Congo Free State to the Belgian government. The papers are signed. Your personal, private kingdom ceases to exist. It becomes, officially, the Belgian Congo. Historians continue to explore the complex interplay of factors that finally propelled the Belgian parliament to take this decisive step. Was it primarily a surge of genuine humanitarian concern amongst lawmakers, the unbearable and unrelenting international diplomatic pressure, or a more pragmatic, even cynical, desire to secure the colony's vast economic potential for the Belgian nation under a more internationally acceptable and reformed administration? Likely, it was a messy combination of all these elements. As you sign away your empire, the lamplight in your study must have cast long, somber shadows. Perhaps there's a sense of bitter resentment of being robbed of your grandest achievement. You had dreamed of building an empire, and you had succeeded. only to have it snatched away as you saw it by a chorus of sentimental busybodies and jealous rivals. Perhaps there's also a cynical flicker of relief. The immense burden of managing this increasingly problematic and scrutinized enterprise is now lifted from your royal shoulders. Passed on to the Belgian taxpayer, you've secured a handsome financial settlement, and your legacy as the Builder King in Belgium, funded by Congo profits, is already taking shape in stone and steel. The fate of the Congolese people under this new Belgian administration remains to be seen. For now, the relentless international campaign has achieved its primary objective. Your direct, personal rule over the Congo is over. The night air over Brussels might seem a little lighter to some, but the long, dark night for the Congo is far from ended. So, it is done. Your Congo Free State, your grand, private enterprise, is now the Belgian Congo, signed away under the immense weight of international condemnation and the reluctant agreement of your own government. You are, in essence, retired from the empire-owning business, at least directly. The year is 1908, and the Belgian tricolor now officially flutters over Boma and Leopoldville, replacing your personal standard. There are sighs of relief in London, in Washington, in the offices of the Congo Reform Association. Surely now, the thinking goes, the worst of the horrors will end. The Belgian people, with their democratic traditions and parliamentary oversight, will bring true reform, genuine civilization, and a measure of justice to the long-suffering inhabitants of the Congo. You watch this transition, perhaps from your palaces in Brussels or your grand villa in Ostend, with a mixture of bitterness and, undoubtedly, a cynical detachment. You've received your hefty financial compensation, a golden handshake for relinquishing your blood-soaked prize. You probably still felt, deep down, that the world had been terribly unfair to you. A visionary monarch who had only sought to make productive use of vacant lands and idle hands. Those reports of atrocities grossly exaggerated, naturally, by jealous rivals and sentimental humanitarians who just didn't understand the practicalities of extracting vast wealth from a challenging environment. You likely maintained that you were a victim of a smear campaign, right up to your last breath, and that last breath isn't far off. You die in December 1909, just over a year after the handover. You don't live to see the long-term evolution of the Belgian Congo, nor the eventual unraveling of the colonial empires you so admired. Your death closes a particularly sordid chapter, but the story of the Congo and its relationship with Belgium continues. What happens in the Belgian Congo in those early years after your personal rule ends? Well, some of the most overt and photogenically horrifying practices, like the systematic severing of hands as a tool of terror for rubber collection, are indeed curtailed. The international spotlight, now firmly fixed on the Congo, makes such blatant brutality politically untenable for the Belgian government. While the Belgian government's administration of the Congo after 1908 did end some of the most notorious Leopoldian-era atrocities, like the systematic use of mutilation for rubber collection, it continued an essentially exploitative colonial system focused on resource extraction, often utilizing forms of coerced labor and maintaining strict political and social control over the Congolese population. The new colonial administration introduces some reforms, a new legal framework, and a more structured bureaucracy. It's as if they've introduced Congo Exploitation Reformatted Edition, fewer graphically violent scenes, but the underlying plot of resource extraction remains remarkably similar. The insatiable demand for Congo's riches, rubber still, but also copper from Katanga, diamonds, gold, palm oil, does not diminish. The economic structures you put in place, the vast concessions granted to mining companies and plantations, often remain. While the methods of labor recruitment may become slightly less overtly brutal, forms of coercion persist. Hut taxes are imposed, payable only in cash, forcing Congolese men to seek work in European-owned mines and plantations, often far from their homes and for pitiful wages. Forced cultivation of certain cash crops is implemented. Major infrastructure projects, like railways to transport minerals to the coast, still rely heavily on conscripted African labor, often working under harsh conditions. The official Belgian motto for their new colonial prize, if they had one for internal use, might as well have been plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. Just articulated with a bit more decorum and far fewer baskets of severed hands making their way into official reports. There's no universal consensus among scholars regarding the degree or speed of genuine improvement in the daily lives of most Congolese people immediately following the transition from your direct rule to formal Belgian colonial administration. Some argue that the cessation of the worst excesses of the rubber terror marked a significant positive change, while others point to the continuity of exploitation, the lack of political rights, the deep-seated racism, and the economic disenfranchisement that characterized Belgian colonial rule for decades to come. The civilizing mission continues to be the public justification, but it's a paternalistic and deeply unequal relationship. Healthcare and primary education are expanded in some areas, often through missionary societies, but opportunities for higher education or meaningful political participation for the Congolese remain virtually non-existent for a very long time. The deep scars your reign inflicted on the Congolese psyche, on its social fabric, on its demographics, do not simply vanish with the change of flags. The trauma of the red rubber era, the memory of the terror, the destruction of communities, the massive loss of life, these things linger in the collective memory, shaping the future in ways that are hard to quantify, but undeniably profound. You are gone, your restless ambition finally stilled, but the vast colonial machine you set in motion rumbles on, now under new management. The soft lamplight in your grand Belgian palaces is extinguished for you, but the long, uneasy night for the people of the Congo continues, illuminated now by the slightly different, but still pervasive, shadow of Belgian colonial rule. Your direct rule over the Congo has ended, and your own life has drawn to its close. Yet, your presence, your ambition, your reign, they are etched indelibly into the very fabric of Belgium, particularly in its capital, Brussels, and in coastal cities like Ostend. While the name Leopold II would eventually become synonymous with unimaginable cruelty in the Congo for much of the world, within Belgium itself, for a very long time, you were known by a far more flattering epithet, the Builder King, or Koning Bouwheer in Dutch, Roi Bâtisseur in French. And as you, the listener, wander through the elegant streets of Brussels on a quiet evening, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating grand facades and monumental arches, you are walking through a landscape profoundly shaped by the immense wealth extracted from that distant African land. Imagine yourself strolling through the Parc du Cinquantenaire, its magnificent triumphal arch, a beacon against the deepening twilight. This grand complex, with its museums and expansive green spaces, was one of your pet projects, a testament to Belgian independence and industrial prowess, largely funded by the riches flowing from your African enterprise. Or picture the Royal Museum for Central Africa in Tervuren, a palatial building set in a beautiful park. You conceived it as a showcase for the Congo, a colonial museum intended to educate Belgians about their new overseas territory and, not coincidentally, to glorify your civilizing mission. The original museum exhibits from its early days were a masterclass in colonial propaganda, lots of exotic artifacts, dioramas of native life presented in a certain way, and a strong emphasis on the supposed benefits Belgium was bringing to Africa. A slightly different, shall we say, curatorial approach than one might find there today, as Belgium grapples more honestly with its colonial past. Leopold II indeed used a significant portion of the vast profits extracted from the Congo Free State to fund numerous grand public and private architectural projects in Belgium, earning him the nickname Builder King. The list is long, the expansion and embellishment of the Royal Palace of Laeken, with its magnificent greenhouses, the creation of elegant avenues like the Avenue Louise, though initiated earlier. Its grandeur owes much to your era. The development of Ostend as a fashionable seaside resort, the queen of Belgian beaches, with its royal galleries and hippodrome, and significant improvements to the port of Antwerp, ensuring it could handle the burgeoning trade, much of it from the Congo. You had a vision for Belgium, a desire to elevate its status, to make Brussels a capital worthy of a great European power, a little Paris, and you had the funds, thanks to the rubber and ivory, to make these dreams a reality. The question of how much direct Congo profit versus other state or private funds ultimately financed each specific grand architectural project attributed to your reign is sometimes a complex area of historical accounting, especially as you were adept at mingling your personal fortune with that of various enterprises. But the overall, undeniable link between the staggering wealth generated by the Congo Free State and your extensive building spree is a matter of historical consensus. It's rather like admiring a truly spectacular, glittering diamond necklace, only to discover it was acquired through means that might, shall we say, significantly complicate your straightforward appreciation of its beauty. For many Belgians during your lifetime, and for decades after, these magnificent constructions were sources of national pride. They saw a king who was modernizing their cities, creating jobs, and leaving a tangible legacy of beauty and grandeur. The dark origins of the money were often unspoken, unknown, or conveniently overlooked. The narrative was one of a forward-thinking monarch investing wisely in his nation's future. It takes time, sometimes generations, for the full story to emerge, for the gloss to wear off, revealing the more complicated and often painful truths beneath. The Builder King title, while accurate in one sense, perhaps needed a rather lengthy, somber footnote about the source of the bricks and mortar. So, as you continue your imagined nocturnal walk through these impressive Belgian cityscapes, perhaps the distant city sounds, a tram rumbling by, the murmur of voices from a cafe, might make you reflect. These stones, these arches, these grand public spaces were born from a period of immense ambition and equally immense suffering. They stand as monuments to a king's vision for his European homeland, but also, silently, as monuments to the millions in a faraway land whose forced labor and lost lives paid for so much of this splendor. The warm glow of the lamplight on the ornate carvings is beautiful, but it can no longer entirely dispel the long, cold shadows stretching all the way from the heart of Africa. The legacy is complex, a tapestry woven with threads of both light and profound darkness. And it's a story that continues to unfold even now, as societies re-examine their pasts. The grand avenues and imposing edifices you, as the listener, have been wandering through in your nocturnal contemplation of Brussels. Those monuments funded by Congo's wealth stood for a very long time as largely unquestioned symbols of a glorious era, of a builder-king's vision. For much of the 20th century, the story of Leopold II, presented in Belgian schools and public discourse, often glossed over the darker aspects of his reign, particularly the atrocities committed in his name in the Congo Free State. The narrative was one of a great modernizer, a king who brought prestige and prosperity to Belgium, and who, incidentally, acquired a vast African territory that was portrayed, more often than not, as a beneficiary of Belgian enlightenment and industry. It's a common human tendency, isn't it, to prefer the more flattering portrait in the family album, to keep the less savory photographs tucked away in a dusty attic. Confronting the less shiny parts of one's national history can be uncomfortable. Rather like discovering your much-admired great-uncle wasn't just an adventurous entrepreneur, but actually made his fortune selling questionable miracle tonics. Awkward historical family dinners are bound to ensue, but history, like a slow-moving river, eventually carves new paths. The truth, even when deeply buried under layers of myth and deliberate forgetting, has a way of resurfacing. From the latter part of the 20th century, and accelerating into the 21st, a significant shift began to occur in the historical understanding and public awareness of Leopold II's colonial enterprise. Scholarly research, drawing on overlooked archives and giving voice to African perspectives, began to paint a far more damning picture. Influential books, such as Adam Hochschild's King Leopold's Ghost, published in 1998, reached a wide international audience, meticulously detailing the horrors of the Congo Free State and the sophisticated propaganda machine that Leopold employed to conceal them. History, it turns out, isn't always written by the victors forever. Sometimes the footnotes stage a quiet rebellion and demand to become the main text. This growing awareness has fueled intense public debate and activism, particularly within Belgium. Those grand statues of Leopold II on horseback, or standing sternly in public squares, once symbols of national pride, have become focal points of controversy. You might see one on your imagined late-night walk, perhaps in the glow of a street lamp, and notice it's been daubed with red paint, symbolizing blood, or adorned with placards demanding its removal. Petitions circulate, calling for these monuments to be taken down, or at least to have contextualizing information added that acknowledges the full story of his reign. It seems statues, much like monarchs, can have a best before date for unquestioned adoration, after which people start asking very awkward questions, sometimes with spray paint and bolt cutters. This movement to decolonize public spaces extends beyond just statues. The Royal Museum for Central Africa in Tervuren, Leopold's own creation, has undergone a profound reevaluation. After a major renovation, it reopened with a commitment to presenting a more critical and nuanced perspective on Belgium's colonial past, acknowledging the violence and exploitation, and including African voices and perspectives in its narrative. The human zoo aspects of its early displays are gone, replaced by exhibits that grapple with the complexities and brutalities of colonialism. In recent decades, particularly following influential publications and widespread activism, there has indeed been a significant public and academic reevaluation of Leopold II's reign in Belgium, leading to protests, the removal or recontextualization of some statues, and official expressions of regret from the Belgian state regarding its colonial past. The Belgian state itself has slowly begun to address this difficult legacy. In recent years, high-ranking officials, including King Philippe, have expressed deepest regrets for the wounds of the colonial past, particularly the violence and cruelty inflicted upon the Congolese people. While these statements have been welcomed by many as important steps, debates continue about the need for a formal apology, for reparations, and for more comprehensive educational reforms to ensure future generations understand this complex and often painful chapter of their nation's history. The long-term psychological and societal impacts of colonialism, including intergenerational trauma and its influence on contemporary socio-political structures in former colonies, are subjects of ongoing multidisciplinary research. But the visible scars left by Leopold's regime on Congolese collective memory and the persistent calls for justice are undeniable. The process is ongoing, and it is not without resistance. Some argue against tearing down history, or feel that present generations should not be held accountable for the actions of the past, or that focusing on the negative aspects of colonialism overshadows any perceived benefits. It's a complex, emotional conversation, happening in late-night parliamentary debates, in university lecture halls, in newspaper columns, and around family dinner tables. The myths of the Builder King and the civilizing mission are indeed falling, or at least being heavily amended, as future generations grapple with the uncomfortable truths of a reign that was both domestically grand and colonially catastrophic. The quiet night allows for these reflections, as the shadows of the past are slowly, and sometimes painfully, brought into the light of critical inquiry. And so, the grand Belgian edifices settle into the night, their stones holding the quiet weight of a complex past. But the story, as you've likely sensed, doesn't simply end with a change of laws or the passing of a king. Leopold's dream, and the nightmare it wove for so many, casts a shadow that lengthens and shifts with time, reaching far from the cobbled streets of Brussels, across oceans and generations, to touch the living heart of the Congo and the conscience of our modern world. As your own journey with this history nears its gentle end, here in the hushed quiet of your room, you are invited to listen to these faint, persistent echoes. Think of the Democratic Republic of Congo today. The Democratic Republic of Congo, once the Congo Free State, then the Belgian Congo, continues to navigate a path laden with profound challenges, from the quest for stable governance and peace, especially in its eastern regions rich with coveted minerals, to the immense task of ensuring its people benefit from their land's incredible wealth. The echoes of Leopold's era, followed by Belgian colonial rule, are often felt in discussions about its present realities. The precise causal links between the deep wounds of historical exploitation and the specific contours of contemporary difficulties are, of course, complex, and a subject of ongoing earnest discussion among those who study the ebb and flow of nations. Yet, few would deny that the deep roots of its history profoundly influence the soil in which its future must grow. The immense natural wealth, which once drew Leopold's gaze, still presents both great opportunity and immense challenges, a recurring theme in lands that have known the heavy hand of colonial resource extraction. That restless human spirit, the one that drove Leopold to seek an empire, It's a curious thing. Isn't it capable of such soaring vision and, if untethered from empathy, such profound capacity for harm? It's almost as if ambition itself is a powerful, neutral current, and the landscape it carves depends entirely on the bedrock of compassion or its absence, and memory, too, is a stubborn companion. History has this gentle way of resisting neat conclusions, doesn't it? Just when a chapter seems closed and tidily shelved, a new voice, a new discovery, or a new generation's questioning gaze invites us to pull the volume down again, to see the familiar words in a different light. The tale of Leopold's Congo is more than just a chronicle of a king and a distant colony. It murmurs in the background of our contemporary world, in our understanding of global interconnectedness, in the quiet responsibilities that come with knowledge. When we hear of struggles for justice, or debates about fair trade, or the rights of indigenous peoples to their ancestral lands, perhaps we can detect a faint, familiar resonance, a reminder of how easily power can be misused, and how vital it is to listen, truly listen, to voices that have long been subdued, the need for vigilance, for empathy, for asking difficult questions of ourselves and our societies. These are the quiet lessons that history, in its own time, lays before us. The responsibility to remember and to learn is a gentle thread woven through the human experience. And now, let the weight of this long journey begin to lift, like mist in the morning sun. The path we've walked together through the shadowed corridors of the past has been a lengthy one, tracing the arc of a king's ambition from its first restless stirrings to its enduring, complex legacy. The soft glow of the lamp that illuminated our way now seems to soften further, its purpose fulfilled. The distant city sounds you might hear, the gentle hum of your own quiet space. These are affirmations of the present moment, a safe harbor after a deep voyage into yesterday. As the velvet curtain of true night draws fully around you, or as the earliest, faintest whispers of dawn begin to stir far beyond your window, allow the narrative to recede. Let these final thoughts be like the last, soft notes of a song fading into silence. There is no need to hold on to the details, no need to analyze or resolve. The story has been told, and its echoes will settle where they may, perhaps enriching the soil of your understanding in quiet, unseen ways. Your breathing is slow and even, a gentle tide carrying you towards a place of deep rest. The darkness behind your eyelids is a canvas of calm. Any lingering thoughts are like distant stars, observed without attachment as you drift further and further into tranquility. The journey is complete. Let your mind be still. Let your body be heavy and relaxed, and allow the gentle current of the night to carry you into peaceful, restorative sleep.